All right, one of the more fascinating stories as it comes to roster building and development in NFL, and it obviously hits very close to home for the 49ers since it comes in their own division, the NFC West, during an offseason where the 49ers are also trying to put a firm and final valuation on their quarterback. One of those stories is potentially nearing its conclusion. According to multiple reports, a Matthew Stafford decision is expected soon. He's reportedly meeting with the Rams today. This is from Diana Rossini. At some point today, the meeting at that team facility is going to happen. Apparently, the Raiders and the Giants have discussed a 2-year contract for Stafford that includes 90 to 100 million guaranteed. So we can read the tea leaves here. We can put 2 and 2 together. If the Raiders and the Giants are willing to offer Matthew Stafford up to $100 million guaranteed, that could mean about $120 million total compensation. And over 2 years, that would be right near the magic number that we've been talking about for so long regarding Brock Purdy, $60 million average per year. The reason that we talk about $60 million per year is because that is the high watermark of the quarterback position. This is a look at the top quarterbacks by average per year. And you have Dak Prescott leading the charge. Had a lot of leverage last offseason, right before the start of the regular season. I think this contract was actually finalized on the morning of week 1 when the Cowboys played the Cleveland Browns. But Prescott leads the way at $60 million. Burrow, Love, Lawrence, Tagovailoa in the mid-50s, positions 2 through 5 after that. So we could talk about the $60 million per year for Stafford, if that's the valuation that comes back from the Giants and the Raiders, and we can talk about its impact on Brock Purdy. But first, I want to focus on the actual matter at hand, because this decision could be coming as soon as today based on some of the readings that we've gotten from the national media. And it's sure to have far-reaching impacts across the NFL because we don't often see a contract negotiation move like this. Stafford still has 2 years left on his deal. The Rams are in a situation where they are trying to transition into their next roster era. They've had 2 of the biggest draft classes over the past couple years that you'll ever see in the NFL. And to their credit, the draft classes have hit. So they have a lot of players who are going to be due money coming up soon. If your draft classes hit, yes, you do get players in on a cost-controlled basis, which is why the draft is the lifeblood of building a team in the salary cap era. But after 3 years, if those guys aren't first-round picks, kind of like Deommodore Lenoir, you better be ready to pay them. And the Rams, with all of these draft hits, it's been great to rebuild the team following the salary cap hell of a couple years ago. You got to give them credit for being able to resurface from that. But they will face another round of salary cap hell if they do not properly position themselves for all of these young new guys coming up for a contract. So Matthew Stafford's 37 years old. There's a certain price point at which the Rams are comfortable paying Matthew Stafford. We're not sure what exactly that price point is, but we do know that at least up until this point, the Stafford price point and the Rams price point has been too far apart, which is why the Rams allowed Stafford to go out and talk to other teams, get a gauge of his value. And if the number was too disparate, then there seemed to be a likelihood that Matthew Stafford would go elsewhere. But obviously, trade compensation would also have to be agreed upon because the Rams, as a forward-thinking team, would rather move on from Stafford while he still has value that they can recoup in a trade. So this is just moving before it's inefficient if you're the Rams. And I don't think that this team is as close as many surmised this past year to winning a Super Bowl. I know that they were in Philadelphia and it was a close game in the snow, but you also have to remember that a lot of things went the Rams' way in the regular season just to make the playoffs, just to be in position to beat the Vikings at home in that wild card round. There were dropped interceptions galore from Matthew Stafford himself. I'm speaking specifically of the game against the 49ers in December. Really illustrated the fact that the NFC West as a whole was down this year. It's not going to be probable, I think, for the Rams to even get into the playoffs, much less host a game with the type of efficiency that they showed as a team this year in most seasons. They were able to get as far as they did because the NFC West was in a pool of mediocrity, mainly thanks to the 49ers' really rough season in 2024. So the Rams absolutely must be thinking about how they can make the roster and team as a whole better. And Sean McVay's honest with himself. Les Snead is honest with himself. That may not include paying a 37-year-old quarterback up to $100 million guaranteed. That being said, there are other layers to this decision. And because of that, we have some of these reports which have come out a little bit after Diana's report. This is from Ian Rappaport. Matthew Stafford returning to the Rams feels more likely than a few days ago when it appeared he was set to leave. And Vinny Bonsignor, who covers the Raiders, you see this down at the bottom, the Raiders and quarterback Matthew Stafford have found common ground on parameters of a potential deal. While no deal is imminent, it's up to the Rams to match or agree on compensation with Las Vegas. And I'll say to that last point, there's also the family factor, right? So even if the Raiders offer $100 million guaranteed and the Giants offer $100 million guaranteed, and then there's enough trade compensation for the Rams to be like, oh, yeah, we're excited about this. There is a scenario in which Matthew Stafford says, wait, I'll take $80 million guaranteed, or however much the Rams want to offer, however much they're comfortable offering. I'll take this much less because I don't want to uproot my family. And I also enjoy working with Sean McVay and company. So there are really three dynamics, right? There's the potential compensation from a new team. There's the potential trade compensation to make the Rams happy. And then there is the Matthew Stafford family factor. My wife, Margot, might have been joking. Maybe he wasn't joking when I told her, hey, Matthew Stafford wants more money than the Rams are offering. And Margot asked, does Matthew Stafford want more money? Or does Kelly Stafford want more money in this situation? Because it appears that Kelly Stafford has been doing a lot of the speaking for Matthew Stafford in the media. We first found out about all of this drama through Kelly Stafford on a podcast. So it just goes to show you that family considerations are definitely going to be part of this. And because of that, it adds a tricky third layer to the situation. You know, there's even been a fourth layer to this entire situation. Tom Brady and the Raiders, and it led to a verbal altercation at the famous Starbucks at the NFL Combine. Combine going on right now. I just walked by that Starbucks the other day. It's in the JW Marriott, and the Indianapolis setup is really cool because you can walk from your hotel room at the JW Marriott, or even at the neighboring, I think there's a courtyard or something next door. And then there's other hotels, and they're all connected by indoor walkways, and they're kind of skyways. Most of them are above ground, and you have a nice little view of downtown Indianapolis, but you could stay inside. And this network of skyways goes through hotel lobbies and then passes to the next hotel, and everything obviously funnels into the big convention center where the NFL Combine formally takes place. So all these NFL people, from agents to reporters, are going to be taking this walkway network, and in a very central location on the walkway network at an intersection of two of these walkways is the famous Starbucks at the JW Marriott. It is a popular NFL meeting spot. So if you're going to meet an agent, if you're going to meet somebody from your company, a coworker, you know, anybody who's at the NFL Combine, you'll often say, I'll meet you at the Starbucks at the JW Marriott. Well, just a couple days ago, it turns out that two of the big insiders, one of them, we just quoted Ian Rappaport, rap sheet up here, two of the insiders got into an altercation. It was Jordan Schultz and Ian Rappaport. And Jordan Schultz was apparently unhappy with Ian Rappaport's tweet, because what happened is that Jordan Schultz reported that Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford had met and skied together in Montana as part of a very aggressive courting from Tom Brady and the Raiders to try to get Matthew Stafford to join their team. Ian Rappaport came back a few hours later and tweeted that it was just a chance encounter between Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford in Montana, and that this was not a pre-planned courtship by Brady and the Raiders. I thought my read on the situation was that there was some damage control happening and Ian Rappaport was willing to do it for Tom Brady. I'm guessing Tom Brady didn't want it out there that he's out there skiing with Matthew Stafford and that the Raiders are putting on that big of a full court press, even though it's not technically tampering because the Rams did give permission to Matthew Stafford to talk to other teams. But it seems to me that Brady's camp didn't want it out there. Then through Ian Rappaport, they tried to play it off as more of an accidental meeting. And Jordan Schultz thought that his credibility was being attacked by Ian Rappaport. So he went up and confronted him at the Starbucks at the JW Marriott of the NFL Combine. Not a physical altercation, but I guess NFL security did start investigating. I'm not sure what they'll say. The big crazy coincidence behind all of this is that Jordan Schultz is the son of Howard Schultz, who's the former CEO of Starbucks. So not the Thrilla in Manila, but what did they call it on Pro Football Talk? The Thrilla and Vanilla Latte at Starbucks. The Frappuccino Fracas. It's crazy where this Matthew Stafford drama has taken us. Anyway, we do expect a decision soon, according to some of these reports. And no, there was not tampering. This whole thing, though, it's so fascinating to me because we can look at the 49ers impact right now. We just talked to John Lynch the other day at the NFL Combine, and he said that the negotiations with Brock Purdy are in their infancy. So based on what I gathered, this is going to be a long, hard negotiation between the 49ers and Purdy. And, maybe I should strike the word long. Maybe it comes together much more quickly than a lot of people expect. But I think this is going to be a tough negotiation for obvious reasons. The 49ers have paid more top shelf A-list money than any other team since John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan took over back in 2017. So they have to operate within that context. They've surfed the salary cap wave very efficiently over the course of these past 8-9 years, but they have to work within that context moving forward, especially since Purdy is due massive, massive money. If Matthew Stafford is able to command something close to $60 million per year with this market experiment that we're seeing right now, it does reinforce the notion that a quarterback like Brock Purdy should earn a contract that is at or near the top of the entire NFL market. Now, I will say that Purdy and Stafford are absolutely in separate boats. Stafford is 37, Purdy is 25, but Purdy is in the more favorable boat for quarterback contractual purposes because he is younger. It's fascinating to me that Matthew Stafford, despite the fact that he hadn't been all that great over the course of the past 3 seasons, ever since that 2021 Super Bowl run, he is still commanding so much interest. It just gives you an idea of how sought after a competent quarterback is in this day and age. Let's take a look at some of the performance metrics because this all needs to be rooted in data. And I think that recent data is what is going to be most valuable when it comes to determining how a quarterback might perform moving forward in the future. Take a look at efficiency over the course of the past 3 seasons. This is ever since Brock Purdy joined the league. You want to be further to the right and further up on this chart. Brock Purdy has been the most efficient quarterback in football over the course of the past 3 seasons. You can see Purdy here. This is the EPA CPOE composite, number 1. Look at where Matthew Stafford is. It's way down at number 18. See it one more time. Down at 18, Purdy at number 1. Purdy, top right. Matthew Stafford, I find it funny that his dot here is very similar to the location of Aaron Rodgers on the graph. Now, the asking point for Matthew Stafford when it comes to bigger money comes from his performance in the NFL postseason. And it certainly has been impressive. Since 2018, here are the top quarterbacks by expected points added per play in the postseason. Matthew Stafford's on top. So you look at this and then you go to this and you see Stafford hadn't been all that good in the regular season. There's been a definite drop-off as he's hit age 37, but he still has delivered in the postseason. I know now most of this happened in 2021, so that also has to be noted. And it's since 2021 where Stafford's play has fallen off. But there have been 3 solid outings in the postseason, and that's saying more than a lot of other quarterbacks who have really struggled in the playoffs. There have been 3 solid outings since that 2021 season, although I have to say that the Rams did lose 2 of them. They've been 1-2 over those 3 games. Sean McVay was on a podcast the other day with Andrew Whitworth, where he did make the point that Stafford in the postseason games that the Rams have lost over the course of the past 3 years, Stafford has done everything in his control to make it a win. So obviously the Rams still like this quarterback, but that's what makes this so fascinating, is that I think that they're looking at this as dispassionately as they can. They're trying to remove nostalgia. They're trying to remove emotion, and they're trying to look at the fact that they're transitioning into their next roster era. A lot of young players turning the page. A lot of these guys the Rams are rostering right now were born after the year 2000. Meanwhile, Matthew Stafford is older than I am. He's 37 years old. So he was born back probably, 1987, 1986 at the soonest. So, I mean, there's a massive, massive gap between the oldest Ram, Matthew Stafford, and this young, burgeoning core that they have. And they know that at some point they're going to have to turn the page. Why not just make it now if Matthew Stafford does command the type of interest that would allow the Rams to recoup draft capital? When I wonder about the teams that might pick him up, it seems the Raiders might not be as incentivized as the Giants to take on an old quarterback at big money, because the Raiders have a new staff. They have Will Spytek as the new GM. Pete Carroll is the new head coach. How about the thumbnail from Mike, by the way? Hell of a thumbnail. But Pete Carroll's the new coach for the Raiders, and they have leeway right now, right? They're going to have some runway to take off. They don't necessarily need to commit big money to a young to an old quarterback early in their tenures. Whereas the Giants, well, that's a team that is facing the hot seat at both the coaching position and the GM position. They need results right now. So if you're going to take a bigger swing at an old quarterback, I think the New York Giants might be more incentivized. In both cases, I think the decision coming up here is, will Stafford be willing to accept a worse situation for more money? I mean, that is what it simply boils down to. Worse situation, more money. Because the Rams, I think, have a nice blossoming situation, but the reason that it's blossoming and the reason that it might continue to blossom is that they won't have to dedicate money at an extreme level to a 37-year-old quarterback. You can do it with a younger quarterback like Brock Purdy, Jalen Hurts. We saw the Eagles pay Jalen Hurts a couple years ago, and they've been fine. But once guaranteed money starts going a 37-year-old's way, it's a lot harder to manipulate the cap impact and really set yourself up over the long-range takeoff, because these things can be stretched out like an accordion for cap purposes. It's a lot harder to make that work in the context of the roster. So I do wonder, though, because that third pillar that we talked about, the family situation for Matthew Stafford, is he willing to accept a worse situation for more money? Obviously, more money would be something that he's looking for from a professional family standpoint. But the situation, I don't think, will be as good with the Giants. Maybe a lamed up coaching staff there. And well, with the Raiders, it's interesting, but that staff is just getting going, right? They had to clean house in Las Vegas, and it might be a year or two before that roster is in a position where it can truly compete. Whereas the Rams, they've undergone their retooling effort over the past couple of years, and we saw them compete this past season. So fascinating stuff coming up. Matthew Stafford decision is expected soon. We can talk about the evolving NFC West landscape as it relates to the 49ers. This was a down year, no doubt, for San Francisco. The Rams ended up winning the division, even with a team that wasn't that great. I think that the Rams offer a very intriguing potential model for the 49ers. It's almost like a JV Eagles model. The Rams were last in NFL defensive spend this past season. Dead last. They obviously spent quite a bit of money on their offense. You had Matthew Stafford under contract. Cooper Kupp was on the offense. They spent over $15 million annually on two separate guards. And now they want to trade one of them in Jonah Jackson. So the Rams poured quite a bit of money into the offensive side of the ball, next to no money relatively into the defensive side of the ball that used to host Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, big-name defensive players. And they were able to see defensive success, especially toward the end of the season, with this budget approach. It was mainly because they hit on a lot of defensive line picks, Jared Verse being the one that stands out the most. He really had a nice run for the Rams. A lot of sacks for Jared Verse, and part of a defensive line that, I think it's fitting that they faced the Eagles in the postseason, because the Eagles, that's a team that rebuilt tremendously through the draft. And now the rumors are that the Eagles are interested in Myles Garrett, that Howie Roseman may not bring back some players so he could have room to trade for Myles Garrett in the event that he becomes available. The Browns still are publicly in denial about that whole situation, but Myles Garrett wants out, and the Eagles might be interested in stacking up even more on the defensive line, but they've built through the draft. The Rams have too. And when we talk about the evolving landscape, the Rams are going to be dangerous for some time to come because of how naturally, how efficiently they've built up that side of the football. Meanwhile, though, they have been willing to pay on the offensive side. The question is, how much are they willing to pay an old quarterback like Matthew Stafford, and what is their next step going to be on offense? Is it Jimmy Garoppolo at the quarterback position? I'm not so sure that it would be somebody like Aaron Rodgers, even if he does want to come to LA, because if he wants the same amount of money as Matthew Stafford, then you run back into square one. Similar problem. Aging quarterback, too much money, can't build the rest of your roster. So the Rams are running a balancing act, and I do think if they move on from Matthew Stafford, it might make most sense for them to go to a cheaper option and try to maintain as much efficiency as possible. And that might be the perfect time and place for somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo. We'll see. We have to answer all these questions as we talk about the evolving NFC West landscape for the 49ers. They have to turn the page now. San Francisco does. Let's find that John Lynch article. Time to turn the page for them and put that focus on this guy right here, Brock Purdy. 49ers trying to build a team around number 13. And as they try to do that, John Lynch is going to be straining over the course of however long it takes for the 49ers to get this deal done. But then they have to build the roster even when that deal is finished. And that's why we wrote about what we did the other day with John Lynch. No guarantees, because you're going to have to get Purdy to sign on the dotted line, and the 49ers are going to try to drive the hardest bargain possible. Purdy's going to try to get the best deal possible for himself. It's business happening on the 49ers front, business happening on the Rams front. And when all the dust settles from this offseason, we will have some fascinating answers regarding the status of the quarterback market. I think it's time to open up to some of your questions. Let's talk about this evolving NFC West landscape. Let's talk about Matthew Stafford and the Rams, Brock Purdy and the 49ers. It is Friday morning. Why don't we have at it? I am excited for a great discussion on this morning. Questions, we are ready for them. If the 49ers and Purdy can't settle on a contract, what's plan B? Whew, that's a loaded question right there. I don't know what Brock Purdy's willingness to hold out or hold in would be. Knowing that would help answer your question more accurately. Because if the 49ers and Purdy don't settle on a contract and then Purdy refuses to play, that's his ultimate leverage, right? And that puts the 49ers in an extremely tough position if they're really intent on competing in 2025. So if that's the case and the 49ers want to compete in 2025, there is no plan B. You've got to figure out a way to get the contract done. You're going to have to pay market rate. Now, if the 49ers want to pay less than market rate, if they feel that their cap situation just doesn't allow them to get to where Brock Purdy and his representatives want to be, somebody's going to have to blink. I don't know what plan B is. Somebody has to blink. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have made it clear that they want Brock Purdy to be the quarterback as long as they're there. So they're not going to trade him. They would be crazy to trade him based on what he's shown them over the first 3 years. I've always thought that the natural resolution here is a market rate deal that the 49ers are able to fit into their salary cap situation through some salary cap creativity. That's where the 49ers have ended up with all of these contract negotiations. I don't want to say disputes, just pay negotiations. It's always ended up with a deal that has satisfied both parties. And if both parties are willing, you can reach that happy conclusion. So it's tough to talk about plan B when you realize that for the receiver position, there was a plan B. There was a trade that was feasible, right, for the 49ers with Brandon Ayuk. There would have been a trade that could have been feasible for Deebo Samuel. I think that there have been two cases where plan B never really materialized as a serious thought. In the Nick Bosa contract negotiation back in 2023, and now in this Brock Purdy negotiation, doesn't really seem that there is a plan B, which is why I assume that this is going to reach a point of agreement where both sides walk away satisfied, ready for the partnership moving into the future. What experience do I have that qualifies me as a replacement for Brian Griese? I'm just kidding. What experience does Mick Lombardi have? Mick Lombardi, David Lombardi are not related. Brian Griese and Mick Lombardi are two different types of coaches. I think people need to wrap their heads around that. You're not going to get the same thing as you did with Brian Griese. Brian Griese was the perfect quarterback coach at the perfect time for Brock Purdy. He was somebody who had been there, done that as a player, was able to instruct Purdy regarding how to handle the emotional highs, the ups, and the downs of the NFL. He was the successor to John Elway with the Denver Broncos, and prior to that, he was the predecessor to Tom Brady with the Michigan Wolverines. He was uniquely positioned to give almost life advice on how to handle the quarterback situation to the 49ers' young QBs, namely Brock Purdy. And Purdy emerged into a great leader at the NFL level while Brian Griese was his coach. So now Brian Griese has stepped away from coaching. What's next? Mick Lombardi, not a quarterback like Brian Griese, the NFL level, But he has been a coordinator. And unlike Brian Griese, he has coaching experience. He literally called plays at the NFL level. So I think that you can expect Mick Lombardi to bring in more of a connection to the schematic side of things, which one could argue is actually the logical next step in Brock Purdy's development. Now, Mick Lombardi also got a chance to work with Tom Brady. 2019, he was the assistant quarterbacks coach in Brady's final season with the Patriots. All this is relevant. So I think that's some of the experience that does qualify him to be a replacement at that QB coach job. Which trade is more feasible? Garrett, Crosby, or Joey Bosa? Well, Joey Bosa might not be a trade at all. Joey's got 1 year left on his deal, and he might be a cap casualty just given the fact that he hadn't played as many games here recently. The injuries have been an issue. This could be somebody that is released by the Chargers. There was already talk about it last season. They were able to restructure his contract, find a way to keep him aboard. This season might be different for Joey Bosa. And if it is indeed different, then the 49ers could theoretically sign him as a free agent. So we've got to keep our eyes on that possibility, which makes it the most feasible potential add for the 49ers in terms of probability. Myles Garrett, well, the Browns don't even want to trade him at this point, and I don't even think the Raiders have been asked about Max Crosby. Fans created that rumor on their own, but new regime, you never know what the new regime is thinking. I would always think that if you're coming in as Pete Carroll, as Will Spytek, and you have one of the best edge rushers in the game in Max Crosby, why would you want to kick off your new tenure as leaders of a new team by getting rid of a very valuable player at one of the most important positions? That it never made sense for me, unless Max Crosby was on some kind of terribly disadvantageous contract for the Raiders, but he's not. They're toward the end of his deal. Money's not guaranteed anymore. He may demand an extension next offseason. You can always revisit this next offseason, though, and trade him. So I just don't see the Raiders moving on for Max Crosby. I don't see them dealing with the 49ers. I guess you could never say never. I think that's important in the NFL. It's always important to entertain every single possibility, at least in your head. But to me, it makes much more sense for a team like the Browns to ultimately trade Myles Garrett. And I could see Nick Bosa leaving in free agency after they cut him in this situation. And that would make it much more accessible to the 49ers. You say that Brandon Allen isn't going anywhere, but Brandon Allen's not under contract for 2025. So I think there's a really strong chance the 49ers bring in another backup quarterback this season. It's going to be Joe Flacco. Or are they going to go a veteran route to raise the floor under Brock Purdy? But Brandon Allen, again, he was only under contract for this 2024 season. Make Joey Bosa a situational pass rusher a la Aldon Smith. Well, I mean, I talked about it yesterday. Bosa is the one player that might come on a very cost-efficient deal for the 49ers. I mean, you could view the injury problems as a drawback, but they could also be an opportunity. That's also the way that you might be able to get him at less than $20 million per year, in which case you might be able to afford him. That you're always looking for cost efficiency. Yes, there are going to be drawbacks, but you pay for production and availability in this league, right? And Joey Bosa hadn't been as strong on the availability half of things, but the production half, when he's been available, has been really good. So maybe you could find a discount because of the availability issues if you're the 49ers, and then you can always hope that you get lucky. He's also not going to have to be the primary guy. His brother Nick would be the primary guy. And if he is a situational pass rusher, he's also really good against the run. Let's not discount what Joey Bosa can bring to the table. But if you do bring him in, I do think it's going to be at a price that makes sense for the 49ers. So that's why you start talking about, okay, where is the value here with Garrett, with Bosa, with Max Crosby, if you want to take the rumors that far. Khalil Mack is another good one. He's actually going to be a free agent here in less than a week and a half. but you're always striving for value. And that doesn't preclude you from taking a massive swing on an edge rusher. But the value's got to be there, which is why I talk about Myles Garrett, because he might be the best in football. So even if it costs a lot of draft capital to get him, if the Browns are willing to trade him, you're interested because it might be worth it since he's so good. Dominant players can transcend a very high price. We'll put it that way. Somebody's saying that Bosa's worse than Nick Bosa. Well, I mean, that's a high bar. Nick Bosa is one of the best players in the league. So we said that when Nick was drafted, that Nick could be the better Bosa. And I think that's proven to be the case. Yes, Ayuk did say that he made negotiations more difficult than needed. He essentially acknowledged that he was sitting on the deal that he signed for the last 3 weeks. So the 49ers can only do so much in these negotiations. It ultimately takes both parties to sign on the dotted line. And it took Brandon Ayuk an extra 3 weeks to sign on the dotted line last season. What's my honest opinion on Jake Moody? I thought I gave it in my video on Jake Moody yesterday. He's a nice guy, and I think he's a really talented kicker, but I think that he got really screwed up by the high ankle sprain this past season. The numbers back that up. He was 14 of 15 before it. He was 11 of 20 after it. It's put the 49ers in between a rock and a hard place, where I believe that the best way forward is to bring in competition for Jake Moody. Cutting him serves absolutely no purpose to anybody except for emotional fans who want instant gratification of somebody losing their job. And sorry, it just doesn't work that way. Just because you're sitting at home behind a computer screen cheering for somebody to lose their job for absolutely no benefit to an organization, it's not going to happen. So the 49ers are going to keep Jake Moody aboard, and he's going to compete in all likelihood for the kicking job. Again, he was 14 of 15 before the injury last year. 49ers have even turned to soccer teams to get their thoughts on how this injury might affect kicking because it flummoxed them. They even regretted letting Jake Moody back out onto the field as soon as they did. So they hope that he rights the ship in 2025. But in the case that he doesn't, which is always a danger, the 49ers are going to try to have a contingency plan on standby, maybe even on the roster. So it's a complex situation. But thankfully for the 49ers, you have the ability to treat it as a competition with flexibility moving forward. As Mike simply says, let Moody win his job with competition. Mike may or may not be biased. Look at his avatar. It says Money Moody. Looking very closely down on my screen there. Yeah, Mike's got Jake Moody in his competition, in his avatar, and he wants a kicking competition. So I think that's a fair way to handle things if you are the 49ers. Money Moody. All caps. You know, Invader 49er is a great commenter. He's on all our shows. Cool guy. Always has intelligent comments. He's like the Danny G of YouTube. Now, Danny G is like a Twitter legend. Always has really measured, smart 49ers takes. And he watches YouTube. Every time I shout out to him, he sends me a DM. He's like, thanks for the shout out. But I never see Danny G comment on YouTube. I would love to see Danny G comment one day. Maybe he's got a different screen name. Danny, if you've got a different screen name, let us know. If you're actually on this stream, would be awesome. Because he's got good takes online. I really appreciate Danny G. Mike says, to be fair, even though he has a Moody avatar, I was on Team Cut Moody during the season, but my emotions have calmed down. Yeah, guys, it's February 28th. It is the last day of the month. The 49ers haven't played football in damn near 2 months. Emotions should definitely be cooler now. And you can realize that there's a practical way of doing business. And it does not involve cutting an obviously talented kicker. I mean, we've seen the talent. We've seen the 50-plus yard kicks. We saw what he did in Michigan. The practical, rational way of thinking does not involve cutting a kicker with 2 years left on his contract just to see somebody else sign him and have him beat you down the road. There's no upside to the 49ers doing that. You might as well see what Moody can do to bounce back from this injury, because you've seen good kicking from him. You saw the start. He made 6 field goals in that first game against the New York Jets to open the 2024 season. He drilled that long one in the Super Bowl with so much on the line against Kansas. What was it, like a 57-yarder? That was a long kick. 14 of 15 to begin this season. I mean, the talent is there. The performance hasn't been, but let's just proceed with this rationally. I think the 49ers, after I asked John Lynch about it, it does seem very apparent that they're going to bring in competition for Jake Moody. Danny G is a burner account, Mike says. How epic would that be if that was a burner account coming from the 49ers building? That'd be cool. I mean, he brings good thoughts, good, rational thoughts, well articulated. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you go to X and search Danny G. So it was 55 yards in the Super Bowl. Sorry, it wasn't 57. Didn't Butker hit a 57? Or Moody might have hit a 57 at some other point that season, but 55 is good. Yeah, he was really good in college. You never know. There are a lot of smart random people. Is the defensive tackle position something that the 49ers will be looking at in the NFL draft? That's a good question. A lot of good defensive tackles. There's just a lot of defensive tackles in the combine. The number of the combine to me has been 41 DTs after there were only 25 last year. And when we look at the 49ers and this roster, I've got the 2025 depth chart ready. I mean, I see defensive tackle and I see these mid-tier veterans, Malik Collins, Jordan Elliott, and I see some young guys, Kalia Davis and Evan Anderson, and I see room for improvement, especially in the pass rushing department with Elliott. He's been a good run stopper, but I think they need a multi-purpose defensive tackle. The Eagles were able to replace Javon Hargrave with Jalen Carter. The Eagles, I mean, they just have dudes and dudes and dudes. Milton Williams, also a really good player. 49ers need to pick up some dudes at defensive tackle. So, yes, I do think they're going to be very interested in this NFL draft. 49ers have 4 picks in the top 100 of the draft. How about that? 4 in the top 100. That means that they can really focus on trying to add premium talent. And let's not lose sight of the fact that after, really tough hauls in 2022 and 2023, it wasn't good, right? Brock Purdy really saved that 2022 class. 2023, not looking hot at all right now, especially with Jair Brown losing his full-time position at the end of the 2024 season. But the 2024 draft is looking nice. Ricky Pearsall, Renardo Green, Dominic Pooney, Malik Mustafa, Isaac Guerrendo. Their first 5 picks are all big contributors already. Jacob Cowing, I think, has shown some promise. We'll see if we see more from Tatum Bethune coming up this next season. I mean, that draft class, 2024, the 49ers, it appears that they hit it out of the park. Now the question is, can they do that again with 4 top 100 picks in 2025? That's the cliffhanger that we can leave you on. Right now, we're waiting to see if the Rams are able to bring back Matthew Stafford. A decision is expected soon. He's still under contract with LA, but close to $60 million APY may be on the table from the Giants and from the Raiders, which would be $100 million guaranteed. Might be hard for Matthew Stafford to turn that down if the Rams aren't anywhere close. But the Rams are transitioning into their next roster era, so they know that at some point they're not going to be able to hold on to a quarterback nearing age 40. Maybe they can recoup some value. It is a complicated situation. The latest from Ian Rappaport, not sure what Jordan Schultz has said as the latest here, after the brouhaha, get it, pun intended, at Starbucks. But the latest from Rappaport is that it seems likelier that Stanford, little Freudian slip there, reaching out to the alma mater with my words. No, it seems likelier that Stafford will return to the Rams than follow the full court press coming from the Raiders and Giants. But we shall see. This is something that is part of the NFC West evolving landscape, and I think can really color how the division proceeds moving forward. The Rams are trying to get younger. They're trying to, and they have successfully gotten younger, but now they want to maintain that, and they're trying to turn the page into the next era. Maybe move to a bridge quarterback like Jimmy Garoppolo this next season. Because I do think that the Rams are smart. They do realize that they rode through a down division this past year. I don't think that the Rams had a juggernaut of a team. The data certainly indicates that they didn't. But they saw an opportunity with the NFC West this year. They seized that opportunity. They didn't go to the playoffs. They got a big win against the Vikings, but they were not good enough to beat the superpower, the Philadelphia Eagles, who ended up winning the Super Bowl. And Stafford is probably not going to get any better. In fact, over the course of the past 3 years, Matthew Stafford has not been an efficient quarterback in the regular season. Now, we can go to his playoff numbers. Those have been good. The Rams have still been 1-2 since the 2022 season in the postseason, despite his relative success in the postseason. So we totally understand why the Rams are acting the way that they are. They want Matthew Stafford at a set price. They do not want that price to exceed a certain threshold because he's not good enough anymore for that price to exceed the threshold. You know who's been really damn good and much better than Stafford over the past 3 years? Brock Purdy. And he is the centerpiece of the evolving NFC West landscape over the course of the coming seasons. That's why we're going to be paying such close attention to Brock Purdy and this whole contract dynamic for the 49ers moving forward. If you have any more questions, I am happy to answer them. If you don't have any more questions, we'll ride off into the sunrise. Not the sunset, it's the sunrise because it's still Friday morning. I may swing through San Francisco next week, may swing through LA very briefly. It just depends on if it works out for the schedule. I know that would put me 2 hours behind where I am right now. There's another news update from Mike. This just in, Bill Belichick in North Carolina will be featured on the offseason edition of Hard Knocks after NFL Films was unable to secure an NFL team following last year's Giants experience. Oh, interesting. Belichick said that he wanted to run his program in North Carolina like an NFL team. Well, now he even has Hard Knocks following his team around. Crazy how that works. Bill Belichick is bringing the pros to college football. I am not related to Mick Lombardi. No, I'm not. So I'm unbiased here. I'm not vouching for Mick. I obviously have met Mick. His dad is Mike, who, speaking of Belichick, is the GM for Bill Belichick at North Carolina. Mike says he's amazed Bill would allow Hard Knocks into his building. But that being said, he's in a different position now. Even though he's trying to make it like a pro team and the NIL has shifted the landscape of college sports, you still trying to advertise yourself in college football more than you are on the pros for those recruits. So all exposure is good exposure. And I think that that's the way that Bill Belichick is looking at this. All right, guys, I wanted to go exactly 49 minutes talking the 49ers. And I have. Everybody hit the like button. Everybody hit the subscribe button. We've talked Stafford. We've talked the 49ers and the NFC West landscape. We'll see you soon.